My wife and I are about to kick our daughter out. Originally posted by USD Blazer in R. True Off My Chest on June 28, 22. Updated January 25, 23. Original post. My wife and I are about to kick our daughter out. Don't worry. She's a grown 22-year-old college grad. She moved out, but moved back to save money about a year ago. She's employed full-time, and the only financial obligation she has aside from paying for the wedding she's planning at the end of this year is her $200 per month car note. We even paid half of her tuition all 4 years of school so she wouldn't have to pay student loans for the next 30 years like my wife is still doing. She likes to complain about our meager expectations of her dishes, laundry, keeping her space clean, being respectful and considerate of the other 3 of us living in the house. These shouldn't be foreign concepts to her as she was only living away from home for 6 months. Before moving back in, she got engaged to a guy in a foreign country after 6 months of dating. Read. Talking on the phone for hours at a time. Often on speaker while pacing the halls. She has only flown down to visit him 5 times for 35 days at a time. Not enough time to know who the other person truly is. Emo. Their relationship is chock full of red flag behavior from both of them. She tells us she has everything figured out, but constantly presents us with examples of how ill-prepared she is for marriage and being financially independent. Recently our dialogue has escalated from us asking that she take into account the rest of us living in the house and how her actions affect us, to her screaming and storming off exclaiming that she can't wait to leave the next time we have one of these heated conversations. My wife and I are going to inform her that it is no longer in anyone's best interest for her to continue living in our house. If she is truly an adult and feels she doesn't owe us the respect due to parents who are allowing their adult child to live in their house rent-free, preparing her meals for her, and covering her living expenses, she can blaze her own trail on her own dime. It's not fair to my wife, myself, or our teenaged son to live in an environment fraught with turmoil. I love her, but if she believes she would be better off without us lording our rules over her, it's time to watch the little bridie fly. Update 6 months later. So maybe the original title was hyperbolic. My wife and I would never throw her on the streets. But the tension between everyone in the house was obvious and counterproductive. We never kicked our daughter out, but I did tell her during one of our heated exchanges that she might want to consider finding a place to stay if she felt we were a hindrance to her independence. She quickly shot down the idea when I told her rooms in our hometown were renting for almost as much as our mortgage payment. The argumentative nature of our interactions was still present, but after she and I had several deep discussions in the following months, things improved. A lot of our arguments revolved around her stress trying to plan a wedding, balance work, and coordinate how she'd integrate into life in a new country while still living in the US. We just happened to be the easiest target when she needed a place to unload. I'm a problem solver by nature, and it's hard for me to listen to someone vent, explain an issue and not be working on a solution. In my head, I suppose my daughter really just wanted a sympathetic ear and no input from me on how to solve her problems. I worked actively to improve the way I addressed her emotions, opinions, and things got much better. We did have a hiccup a couple of weeks before she moved. It started because of a winter coat. I had suggested that even though her new home would be in a tropical climate, it might be wise to take a winter coat, heavy jacket with her. My logic was simply that she may end up flying into a country where she'd need cold weather apparel. And without a coat, it would cost her at least $100 to get a reasonably good coat. Words were exchanged, and we agreed to disagree on the concept. Turns out she thought I was suggesting she take everything she had in the house with her because we didn't want any sign that she had ever lived in the house. I don't know how she drew the conclusion that I didn't want any trace of her from my comment, but that was what she gleaned from my advice. In the weeks before she moved, we took a beach vacation with all of us and my parents, visited my in-laws, had family movie nights, ate meals from our favorite restaurants, had bridal showers, practiced our daddy-daughter dance while crying like babies, sold her car for $2,000 more than what she bought it for 2 years prior, and helped her get all of her packing done. After Thanksgiving, we took her to the airport and she was gone. 2.5 weeks later, we headed down for the wedding. We met our son-in-law and his family for the first time, and despite the language barrier, we were all enjoying each other's company. I managed to dust off my 6 years of high school and college Spanish and gave my daddy speech in both Spanish and English at the reception. The ceremony was beautiful. My daughter was beautiful. My whole family, new, extended, and immediate, were beautiful, handsome. Since the wedding, we stay in touch with each other almost every day. She's starting to see a lot of things from a different perspective. And I know a lot of that is because she has her own life now with her husband. I couldn't help but to chuckle when she explained how cold one of their honeymoon destinations was, and that she was glad to have her coat. I even joked with her about how being overprepared for the situation saved her a lot of headache and some dollar. I've never seen her so happy, and I'm glad she found a man who loves her and treats her well. We're eagerly looking forward to having her come home to visit in about 2 months. I'm sure the pleasant outcome will probably disappoint many fellow Redditors. I mean, who doesn't love piling on a frustrated parent by shaming them and scoffing at every decision they have made to give their kid a better start than they had at her age? Me the whole way through was so suspicious, but I am such a wimp for a happy ending. Smiling face, smiling face, smiling face. I absolutely expected this to go in a different direction. Oops, said we'd be disappointed, but TBH, it's always refreshing having a positive ending with these things. Special shout out to Oop for doing the speech in both languages. Wow, surprised how well everything ended up considering where I thought it was heading. Wait a minute, this isn't the ending I signed up for when I started reading. I know older folks comment about relationships people today have through computers, but I have a different take on it. I met my wife while I was home on leave, spent 3 days hanging out. Then we dated, for 2 years over the phone and through letters. We saw each other a couple times a year, but the longest we spent in person together was the 2 weeks when we got married. Until 6 months after we got married, when she graduated college and could move out to the Pacific island I was stationed on. Near 30 years later, and we think it helped we had to spend so much time talking rather than just be biologically compatible. I still remember the day I went to Korea. I looked up prior during noon on the temperature. It was 16°C and thought I didn't need to bring thicker clothes and told my mom that. Reached there in the morning, it was even lower. Opened my baggage to get more clothes and lo and behold, there was a coat. Called her that night to say I'm sorry to dismiss her advice. You really should listen from people's advices, especially from your parents. Turns out she thought I was suggesting she take everything she had in the house with her because we didn't want any sign that she had ever lived in the house. Sounds like an exhausting time to be around her. Glad they got through it in the end. Adults solving problems through communication in Reddit? Happy for them. I'm a problem solver by nature, and it's hard for me to listen to someone vent, explain an issue, and not be working on a solution in My head. I suppose my daughter really just wanted a sympathetic ear and no input from me on how to solve her problems. I've actually had the same issue and realization except with my love. I gave him unwanted advice and he shot it down till we got mad at each other and I realized I was the problem because I was pushy with my ideas. Now I just lend an ear and then send pictures to make him feel better. It's good to just be the right rock. Let their issues wash over you and give them something to grab onto when they need to stay afloat. But if you're trying to be more than that, then you might just wind up drowning together. It sounds like OOP's daughter was definitely just under a whole bunch of pressure. Which is of course not an excuse. I'm just chuffed to see a happy update. Turns out she thought I was suggesting she take everything she had in the house with her because we didn't want any sign that she had ever lived in the house. I don't know how she drew the conclusion that I didn't want any trace of her from my comment. But that was what she gleaned from my advice. I know exactly the kind of person this is. My sister is the same way. Paranoid and cynical. They will always assume the worst possible connotation of something you say because they're afraid of that being the case. You will never get the benefit of the doubt from them even if they would demand it from you. I found myself smiling at the end, which is pretty rare these days. There is hope. Thanks for sharing. Surprisingly wholesome. Was fully expecting this to take a darker turn. Especially with how scathing Oop was in the first post about the daughter's relationship. Seems like Oop was mainly venting, which allowed them to set boundaries in a compassionate way. Hope everything continues to work out well for them. I'm happy about the ending of the post, but I'm confused about the red flags Oop mentioned. While I'm pleased about this outcome, it's still the honeymoon period of her new life and marriage, and my suspicious little Reddit brain is just saying, give it time. I'm glad that the fiancé wasn't a bad person and they both, including the in-laws, were great loving people. God help the in-laws when she's upset and feels unfairly treated. The whole thing coupled with the language barrier is ill-advised. Might see them on 90 Day Fiancé. Let's wait a few more months till he comes back on to update that they got divorced and daughter is demanding they let her move back in. If both arrives were exhibiting red flag behavior before they got married, it probably isn't going to end well. Fly https://u2.be/clt6hdbush. There is a guy on TikTok who tells you the summary of a story without going through it. I needed him here, lol.
If you enjoyed this video, please check out our playlists full of similar content. Epic Ericast is like doom scrolling for your ears. Please like, share, and subscribe.